Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Mum Predict webinar on journeys in patient and public involvement and engagement. It's very good to have with us this evening Amanda Roberts. We wanted to give our PPI group the opportunity to hear from people who were involved in other areas of health research, not just maternity, as wonderful as maternity is. So Amanda's here. Amanda has extensive experience of eczema, dealing with it herself and in various members of her family, and has been involved in lots of research over the years. And she's now involved in a really exciting citizen science project called the Rapid Eczema Trials. So Amanda's going to tell us all about her journey to get to where she is today and things that other people can pick up from her. So Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. That's very kind of you. And I'm honestly really excited to be able to tell you all about my journey, if you like, in PPI. And I checked with Rachel. She says you all know what PPI is. It's patient and public involvement. And so that's not being a participant. That's about shaping the research. So we've established I'm Amanda Roberts. I'm not in my background, not anything. I'm not a researcher and I'm not a clinician. So I've learnt everything I've learnt going along on the job, if you like. Next slide, please. So the beginnings. Now, the thing that I really can't stress enough, you can see I'm like mega old. I've been on this caper for 30 years and a lot's changed in 30 years. And how did I begin to get involved? So, as Rachel said, I've had eczema all my life. But actually, honestly, I've had eczema all my life. So what? But as soon as I had children, both boys, by the way. So if I use the word synonymously, but I realize some people won't. So as soon as I had the boys, I realized that sadly they had inherited my brains and good looks, of course, but also eczema from me and asthma and various other atopy. And it was when I was taking them to the teaching hospitals, children's outpatients for dermatology, that I realized, so they're over 30, both of them. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, obviously, I was a child bride and gave birth well before my pelvic had sorted itself out. But I mean, we won't go into that. So when I got there, I realised from a poster that they were hoping to set up a support group for carers of children with eczema. And since it had been made pretty obvious to me by my ma-in-law that I had despoiled the family genes by introducing eczema, I thought, and honestly, I hated seeing my boys struggle. So I thought I would join this support group and maybe learn a few things on the way. Unfortunately, and I'm sure this is the same for loads of you, I couldn't sit on my hands long enough. And very soon it became obvious that I was running it. And that's not because I'm bossy. It's just because someone needs to step up to the mark, and I did. So as you can see from my video camera, I'm still running the Nottingham Support Group for Carers with Children with Eczema. We're mainly online. We've got lots of patient information leaflets, which have been developed with healthcare professionals. So it's all, reasonably staid and NHS-wise. May I have the next slide, please? So once I'd done that, I then had the hubris to think, oh yeah, I know all about it. Of course I don't. Nobody knows all about eczema. But I was thinking, oh yeah, I could get involved because they were NICE were about to develop the clinical guidelines for childhood eczema. So this was in 2005, and I volunteered to go on it. They have usually the guidelines in those days, I don't know what it's like now, have two patient representatives on the guidelines. And so I volunteered and was really genuinely so lucky to be chosen. It was wonderful to be in the room with people who knew and really cared about the treatment of eczema. But I put this cartoon in here because even in those days, it's probably changed a lot, but in those days it was very much a kind of, they were really pleased to have patients at the table and they might ask me a question, but I really shouldn't have the temerity to make any real suggestions apart from being asked. And it all felt very, well, slightly uncomfortable. I mean, everybody else had a name thing in front of them saying professor, and I just was boring old Mrs. And, I'm not very good at challenging the status quo, so it was what it was. But I learnt so much. Would you believe I didn't even know what primary and secondary care meant? So I thought, oh, I've learnt all this. What can I do with it? And I went on various NIHR funding panels. So I've been on the program grant for applied research, the health technology assessment funding stream, the research for patient benefit funding stream, quite a few things and several times. So, I'm a glutton for punishment. And I also went on because although I'm kind of mainly involved in eczema, I also, as a lot of people with eczema also have asthma. So I was on the what was called the Asthma UK. It's now called Asthma and Lung UK, but I couldn't find a logo for asthma, for just Asthma UK. So I put that logo there. I was also on their research funding panel for quite a few years. And I suppose the difference there was that the funding panel was it was a patient organization funding researchers. So it was slightly less uncomfortable. And I hope that's not doing a disservice because all of those kind of things are great fun as well. And I really enjoyed them. I wouldn't have just kept going out of any other reason. May I have the next slide, please? Oh dear. Thank You've gone backwards. Brilliant. It's on my screen. I hope it's on yours. So then I went on to various patient input platforms. Now I'm guessing you may be on some of these. And I do find this concept really odd, especially when you first go onto a patient input platform, because you're kind of really bought into the research, whatever the research project is. You've bought into it. You really want to make a difference. And it seems like you're held at arm's length and only consulted every so often. It's really, you want to make a difference, but you have to wait to be asked to make a difference. So it's kind of an odd situation. And the Ubriapred one is a European funded research project, which started over 20 years ago. So I've been on a patient input platform for at least 20 years, which was rather fun. Oh, the slides have just come on to what? Anyway, whatever. I can manage if you guys can manage. Oh, yep, thank you. Back again. So you never know when you go on a patient input platform how long that commitment may be required. So that was for asthma, and I got the great thing. I mean, so often, it's certainly in the early days, you're not paid for being on a patient input platform, but the great thing is for the Ubiapred one, which was for asthma, I managed to get several trips to European capitals out of it, which was great fun. So may I have the next slide, please? So in between that, I've been doing, or I do, reviewing. And reviewing can be for all sorts of different reasons. So, you know, for publications, or for, say, a Cochrane review, or funding applications for, say, the School of Primary Care. And back, please. Thank you. And the reason I've put this picture of the empty pockets is that although it's not always the case, often when you're reviewing, there is no money for that reviewing. Either it's maybe for a researcher trying to set up some kind of application for funding, so that it's pre-funding, they haven't got any money, or the BMJ, BJD, they don't pay you, but then they don't pay anybody. And I've always thought that's a bit odd, in that publications make like poodles of money, and yet they don't pay. They don't pay any of the researchers, clinicians, or anybody else they get to review. So it's all done for love. But of course, it matters more to perhaps to clinicians and researchers, because it goes on their CV. Next slide, please. Thank you. And in between time, I've got involved in a load of other things. So I've got involved in outcome measures for eczema. I've got involved in a Senate. I've got involved in area prescribing committees. I was co-editor, co-sub-editor, whatever, for the research and involvement and engagement publication for several years. I was involved in nurse training, clinical trials unit. I'm on the executive for the British Association of Dermatologists. I'm on several committees for the Primary Care Respiratory Society. So in other words, there are other things that come along, and they're always interesting. You always find out loads of stuff which can be useful for any research that you're doing, or whatever. They're usually not paid, and they're usually kind of an open-ended commitment, which kind of detracts you for if you're really interested in research, as I am. But nevertheless, there are all sorts of opportunities out there. Next slide, please. Thank you. And more recently, there's been the opportunity to become a patient co-applicant on various studies. And boy, have I taken advantage of that. I've been on a study called Bathe, which was about bath emollients for people with eczema. Best emollients, and that's again for eczema. Baby Bathe, which is a preventative. I'm just going to let Mary in. Oh, she's coming. Which is a preventative study. The MMTRC, which is, I think, a bit like Mum Predict. It's all about using big data to find out where treatments and everything else can fit together. But being a co-applicant on big data is really outside my field. Everything else on this page were randomized control trials. So eczema care online, it's a big theme is eczema, isn't it? Eczema care online and stuff like that. I've also been a steering group member, which is kind of odd. You have a meeting maybe once, maybe twice a year, where the research team kind of report back and maybe ask your advice. They don't have to take it, about whatever they're doing. And so I was on a flu, if there was a big flu pandemic, I was on one of their trials, which basically was mothballed for 12 years. And then when COVID hit, everyone decided that everything had gone further than they needed to with this flu thing, so they scrapped it. And I'm on something to do with older people and pain with dementia, which is capped. I'm on their steering group as well. So, you know, I suppose what I'm trying to say is there are loads of opportunities if you just look, and you do become a bit like a pass the parcel. Next slide, please. But this is where I'm enormously excited, and I hate bragging, but I have to brag because I am so excited about what I'm doing at the moment. I am co-principal investigator on a 5-year citizen science program grant with a proper researcher, by the way. So it's okay. Your public money is being spent wisely and properly. So it's 5 years, funded by the NIHR, and we're 2 years in. We've undertaken to do 3 high-quality randomized controlled trials, and we've just finished our first randomized controlled trial. Next slide, please. But just because I'm a patient and co-principal, whatever, it's citizen science. And so we have got loads of citizen scientists we're working with. So we have a community we've built up over the last 2 years of just under 1,000 people. So that's a load of people. And if you're at all interested, you'd be more than welcome to join our community. And we've worked with, so that's, if you like, the outer core of what we're working with. The inner core are people from maybe the citizen science community who actually want to help us to design trials, do knowledge mobilization, all sorts of other tasks that researchers might do within a randomized controlled trial environment. And this picture is just a few of the citizen scientists that we're working with, have worked with, will work with. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, I don't know how this is going to show for you, but it is meant to, if you just click the button, it's meant to move on. So this is, yeah, that exactly. Yeah, there we go. So these are just some comments, 2 comments from citizen scientists about how wonderful it's been to be involved so dramatically. And then this final one is from one of the researchers who's again, we don't think that citizen science has ever been applied to randomized controlled trials in this way before, ever. And so we're feeling our way completely. And so again, this scientist is this researcher. I think this is, it might be, anyway, is that the last quote? Yeah. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that we're all feeling our way, trying to make it right, because randomized controlled trials are very process driven. So you have to get things right. You have to go through ethics. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to do the other. And for instance, to design our first, we're doing 3. We design our first randomized controlled trial, which was about the frequency of bathing and whether that makes a difference to eczema. We had 13 citizen scientists working with us, and they did each did 27 hours worth of working together, and they were all paid. Quite rightly, that's not meant to be, oh dear, you know, that's terrible. But you can imagine if you do the maths, and Rachel's just said she's good at maths, so there we go. But 13 times 27 times, payment, each one does take a lot of time and a lot of money to work up, to be honest. So it took us 9 months to work to that, including 2 community surveys to flesh out questions we had. That's the other point, of course, that citizen scientists, we're trying to get as much diversity as possible. But honestly, and you'll know this for yourself, a citizen is only a citizen. They may work with other people, but at the end of the day, they cannot represent everybody who has an opinion about eczema or about the way we should do the research. They can only be true to themselves. So we've done surveys and things like that to flesh things out a bit more. And as I said, our first trial has just finished, and we had retention of 89%, which we reckon probably vindicates the citizen science way of working. Adherence was about 73%. It only required people to stay in the trial for four weeks, so it wasn't a huge demand. And we completed recruiting in 5 months, which again is much more than or much quicker than you might expect for an ordinary randomized controlled trial. We recruited through social media, through the community, and through GP surgeries. March was our biggest recruiting month. I think our biggest day was something like 61 people in one day. So it was exciting times to be working on it. The results, we haven't officially released the results, but we've told the participants today, so I can share with you, but I don't want it to go any further. Thank you very much. There was no difference between if you either bathed or showered, so you could wash in between, but if you bathed or showered once a week or once a day, there was no effect on the eczema. So for me, that's really good because it means that you've got freedom now, or we've got freedom as people with eczema to concentrate on something else and not, not be rigidly bound by how many times you wash. And unfortunately, if you're living with a long-term condition, you do tend to find things that work for you and then try and stick to them maybe over rigorously. Anyway, next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to leave you with the thought from, not my thought, from Shirley Chisholm, because I really believe in this, which is that if you're not offered a seat at the table, then just bring a deck chair and come and sit down and get on with it, because it takes time for people to get used to patients being around, and they just need to know how useful we are. And I think that's just come on to my last slide, and that's it, which is, I think, saying thank you. Yeah, thank you for listening. I hope it's been useful. Any questions, I'm really happy to take them.
Thank you, Amanda. That was brilliant. So we'll stop sharing and we'll stop recording, and then we'll get on to some questions. Just bear with me while I find the button.